The biometric scanner on the steel door didn't beep. It just clicked open. That was Dominic's first mistake, assuming the security system was designed to keep the world out. It wasn't. He built this cage to keep her in. But tonight, the sensor light is dead, the nursery is empty, and the only thing left in the crib is his titanium wedding ring. The wolf didn't break in. The lamb broke out. The rain didn't fall on the coast of Seattle. It shattered against the glass. Dominic Vane watched the water distort the city lights as his armored SUV wound its way up the cliffside road. It was 3 a.m. The engine purred with a low, aggressive growl, the only sound in a world that felt underwater. He smelled like expensive scotch and Maxine J. Whitehead's perfume, a heavy, cloying scent of vanilla and ambition that stuck to his suit jacket like a stain. He reached for the remote to the main gate. The iron behemoth usually took 10 seconds to groan open, a heavy mechanical warning to anyone trying to enter the Vane estate without an invitation. But tonight, before his thumb even grazed the button, the gate swung wide. Silent, smooth, welcoming. Dominic frowned, his eyes narrowing in the rearview mirror. He stopped the car. The sensors were supposed to trigger a perimeter alert for any approaching vehicle, even his own. His phone sat on the passenger seat, black and silent. No ping. No notification from the security team, just the rain. He drove through, the gravel crunching under the tires sounding like breaking bones. He told himself it was a glitch. The new update to the biometric system had been buggy, or maybe the storm had knocked out a relay. But Dominic didn't become the head of the city's most ruthless shipping syndicate by believing in coincidences. He believed in leverage, and he believed in control. Right now, he felt the distinct, prickling sensation of losing both. He parked the car but didn't kill the engine immediately. He looked up at the house, the glass fortress, the press called it. It was a sprawling masterpiece of concrete and steel, cantilevered over the ocean. Usually, the amber nightlights in the hallway would be on, casting a warm glow for Kimberly. She hated the dark. She said the house felt too big, too cold, like living inside a mausoleum. He always laughed it off, buying her another diamond bracelet to distract her from the silence. Tonight, the house was pitch black. Dominic stepped out. The wind hit him instantly, smelling of salt and ozone. He walked to the front door, his hand instinctively brushing the concealed holster under his blazer. He pressed his palm against the scanner. Access denied. He blinked. He wiped the rain from the pad and tried again. Access denied. User override active. A cold knot tightened in his stomach. User override? There were only 2 admins on this system, him and the head of his security detail. And his security detail knew better than to lock him out of his own kingdom. He punched in the manual code. Nothing. He tried the emergency backdoor sequence. Dead. He stepped back, looking at the seamless steel door. Someone hadn't just changed the locks. They had rewritten the code of the house itself. He walked around the side, toward the terrace, his Italian loafers slipping slightly on the wet slate. The terrace door, usually alarmed with pressure sensors, sensitive enough to detect a stray cat, was unlocked. It slid open with a whisper. He stepped into the living room. The silence was absolute. It wasn't the quiet of a sleeping house. It was the vacuum of a place that had been scrubbed clean. "Kimberly?" His voice echoed off the marble floors, bouncing back at him, hollow and mocking. He didn't yell. Dominic Vane didn't yell. He moved. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his hand now gripping the gun he'd pulled from his holster. He checked the master bedroom first. The bed was made perfectly, not a wrinkle in the silk sheets. Kimberly hadn't slept here. On the vanity, her jewelry box sat open. He walked over, expecting to see it emptied, looted by some brave thief. But the diamonds were there, the emerald necklace he bought her after the gala in Milan, the sapphire earrings from her birthday, millions of dollars in stones, sitting untouched. He turned and ran to the nursery. The door to Leo's room was ajar. A soft, rhythmic clicking sound came from inside. Dominic pushed the door open, his heart hammering against his ribs for the first time in a decade. The mobile above the crib was spinning, little wooden stars chasing a wooden moon. Click, click, click. The crib was empty. No baby Leo, no warmth, no scent of baby powder or that lavender lotion Kimberly used to obsess over. The mattress was bare, stripped down to the waterproof lining. Dominic holstered the weapon. There was no one to shoot. The threat wasn't in the room. The threat had already left. He gripped the rail of the crib, his knuckles turning white. "Kimberly!" he roared this time, the sound tearing through the house. He spun around, scanning the room for a note, a ransom demand, anything. His eyes landed on the changing table. It was cleared off. The diapers, the wipes, the specific organic formula she ordered from Europe, all gone. He ran to the closet. Her clothes were still there. The designer dresses, the heels, the furs, but as he shoved the hangers aside, he noticed the gaps, the tactical gear, the hiking boots he thought she never wore, the heavy wool coats that weren't stylish but were warm. She hadn't packed for a vacation. She had packed for survival. He pulled his phone out and dialed her number. It didn't even ring. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." Not disconnected. No longer in service. That meant the carrier account had been wiped. He dialed his head of security. "Barker, where are my wife and son?" "Sir? They're at the residence. The perimeter logs show no exits since yesterday afternoon. I am standing in an empty nursery, Barker. The alarm is dead. The gates were open. Someone scrubbed the logs." "Impossible, sir. The system is a closed loop. Unless someone had physical access to the mainframe in your study." Dominic dropped the phone. He sprinted down the hall to his study. The heavy oak door was locked. He kicked it open, splintering the frame. His desk was immaculate. His computer monitors were dark. But on the center of the desk, sitting on top of a leather blotter, was a single object. It wasn't a note. It was a black USB drive, a sleek, military-grade encryption key, the kind used by government intelligence or by people who knew how to hide from them. Dominic stared at it. Kimberly E. Pessina was a former art history major. She was a trophy wife who liked flower arranging and Pilates. She didn't know what an encryption key was. She barely knew how to reset the Wi-Fi router. Or so he thought. He plugged the drive into his tower. The screen flickered to life. No password required. A single video file popped up. He clicked play. The footage was grainy, black and white. It was from inside his car, the very car he had just driven home. The timestamp was from 2 hours ago. On the screen, he saw himself. He saw Maxine J. Whitehead laughing in the passenger seat, her hand on his thigh. He saw them pull up to the hotel. He heard every word they said. "She'll never leave, Max. She's too soft. She wouldn't survive a day without my credit card." Dominic watched his own face say the words. Then the video cut to black. A single line of text appeared on the screen, typing itself out character by character. "Soft things break. Smart things disappear." Dominic sat back in his chair, the silence of the house pressing in on him like water pressure at the bottom of the ocean. He looked at the timestamp again. She had been watching. Not just tonight. For a long time, he reached for the phone to call his hackers, to trace the drive, to burn the city down until he found her. But as he reached for the landline on his desk, he noticed the cord was cut. Clean, precise. And then, the lights in the entire fortress went out. The blackout wasn't total. The emergency red floodlights washed the hallway in the color of fresh blood. Dominic stood in the center of his study, the darkness humming with the sound of the backup generators kicking in deep within the bowels of the fortress. He hadn't moved. He was staring at the black screen where the video of his betrayal had just played. 5 minutes later, the heavy thud of helicopter blades cut through the storm outside. Dominic's personal recovery team. He didn't call the police. You don't call the police when you're the Vane Syndicate. You call the cleaners. Vargas, his lead cybersecurity analyst, burst into the room, flanked by 2 armed guards. Vargas was a man who lived in the digital shadows, usually calm, usually arrogant. Tonight, he looked like he was about to vomit. "Sir, the grid is locked down. We're trying to bypass the firewall, but—" "Stop talking," Dominic said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. "Tell me how a woman who spends her Tuesdays at flower arranging classes just bricked a $30 million security system." Vargas rushed to the tower, plugging in his own military-grade tablet. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Code cascaded down the screen, a waterfall of green and red. Dominic watched, his patience thinning like a wire pulled tight. "It's not a brute force attack," Vargas whispered, sweat beading on his forehead. "If it were a hack, the alarms would have screamed. This is an administrative purge." "She had my passcode?" Dominic asked. "No, sir. She didn't use your code. She used her own. Dominic scoffed. Her code is the baby's birthday. 06 to 04. Vargas shook his head, turning the screen toward Dominic. Look at the metadata. The user profile K-Vane wasn't created when you married her 3 years ago. The timestamp on the root access file. It's dated 2 weeks before you met her. Dominic froze. The memory of their meeting played in his head. A rainy afternoon in a gallery in downtown Seattle. She was looking at a painting of a storm. She looked lost, fragile, soaked to the bone. He had offered her his umbrella. He thought he was the predator stalking a beautiful, lonely prey. She hacked the system before she even stepped foot in the house? Dominic asked. She didn't just hack it, Vargas said, his voice trembling. She architected a back door. While you were building the walls, she was pouring the foundation for a tunnel out. Vargas pulled up a new window. I'm running a trace on Kimberly E. Pacina. Trying to find credit card activity, flight logs, anything. The screen flashed. No records found. What does that mean? Dominic barked. It means she's scrubbing it. In real time, Vargas pointed. Look, her driver's license record? Deleted 30 seconds ago. Her bank account? Closed and wiped 40 seconds ago. Her social security number? It's flagging as deceased as of right now. Dominic watched his wife dissolve into pixels. The woman who slept in his bed, who bore his son, was systematically erasing herself from existence. She's not just running, Dominic, Vargas said, forgetting the "sir" in his panic. She's ghosting. This level of erasure. This isn't amateur hour. This is state-level tradecraft, or cartel. Who exactly did you marry? Dominic walked to the window, looking out at the churning black ocean. He thought about the nights she would stay up late, allegedly nursing Leo. He thought about how she insisted on handling the household logistics, the grocery orders, the cleaning staff schedules, the contractor repairs. He realized now, with a sickening jolt, that she hadn't been managing a home. She had been managing an operation. Every contractor she hired was likely a plant. Every grocery delivery could have been a data drop. She wasn't obsessed with being the perfect wife. She was obsessed with the exit strategy. She's not a ghost, Dominic snarled, turning back to the room. She's a mother. She has a 6-month-old infant. She can't move fast. She needs formula. She needs shelter. Find the baby, and you find her. Sir, Vargas interrupted, I found something in the logs. It's not a deletion. It's a download. What did she take? The Cayman accounts? No, she didn't touch the money. Not a cent. Vargas looked up, confused. She downloaded the Black Ledger. The air left the room. The Black Ledger wasn't money. It was the digital record of every bribe, every hit, every shipment of illegal arms the Vane Syndicate had moved in the last 5 years. It was Dominic's life insurance policy against his rivals, and his death sentence if it ever leaked to the feds. She took the leverage, Dominic whispered. And she left a breadcrumb, Vargas said, zooming in on a map. A single signal ping. It triggered 5 minutes ago. Dominic leaned in. Where? The shipping yards. Terminal 4. Container 812. Dominic grabbed his jacket. The shipping yards were his territory, his ground. If she was there, she was taunting him, or she was making a deal. Get the car, Dominic ordered, his eyes cold blue ice. And bring the heavy team. She wants to play spy? Fine. We'll show her what happens when a spy gets caught. But as he walked out of the red-lit study, a thought nagged at him, a small, terrifying thought. Kimberly knew the shipping yards better than he did. She used to visit him at work for lunch, asking innocent questions about the cranes and the containers. He wasn't hunting a rabbit. He was walking into a trap set by a wolf in sheep's clothing. The Seattle shipping yards were a graveyard of rusted metal and shadows, stretched out under the relentless downpour. Dominic's convoy of black SUVs tore through the puddle-slicked concrete, dodging towering stacks of shipping containers that looked like the rib cages of dead giants. Vane Terminal 4 was supposed to be a ghost town at this hour. No workers, no lights. Just the automated cranes standing still against the bruised purple sky. But the GPS signal Vargas had tracked was pulsing from the center of the labyrinth. Container 812, Vargas said from the back seat, his face illuminated by the blue glow of his tablet. It's dead ahead. But sir, the signal just stopped. Stopped? Dominic snapped, checking the magazine of his pistol. It didn't fade out. It was cut, like someone crushed the transmitter. The SUVs screeched to a halt in a defensive semicircle around a red corrugated container. It looked ordinary. Rusted edges, a faded Vane Logistics logo stenciled on the side, but Dominic knew better. This wasn't a shipping container. It was a Faraday cage. A lead-lined, biometric-locked off-site vault where the syndicate kept the physical backups of their dirtiest laundry. "Breach it," Dominic ordered. 4 tactical officers swarmed the doors. They didn't need explosives. The heavy iron locking bars, usually secured with a padlock the size of a fist, were lying on the wet asphalt. Cut. With a thermal lance, Dominic stepped out of the car, the rain plastering his hair to his skull. He didn't wait for the all-clear. He walked past his armed guards and kicked the door wide open. He expected a bomb. He expected an ambush. He found a tomb. Inside, the container was fitted with climate-controlled server racks and a heavy steel safe bolted to the floor. The server lights, usually a comforting blinking green, were dark. The racks were stripped bare. The hard drives, terabytes of blackmail material on senators, judges, and rival bosses were gone, but it was the safe that stopped Dominic's heart. The door to the safe wasn't blown open. It was open a crack, resting on its hinges. He walked over, his boots echoing on the metal floor. He pulled the heavy steel door open. Inside, where the physical ledger and the emergency cash reserves should have been $5 million in untraceable bearer bonds, there was nothing but dust. Kimberly hadn't just downloaded the data from the house. She had physically come here, to the darkest corner of his empire, and gutted it. She couldn't have opened this, Vargas stammered from the doorway, terrified to step inside. "This safe requires a retinal scan and a thumbprint." "Your thumbprint." Dominic looked at the scanner. It was clean. No signs of bypass. "She didn't bypass it," Dominic realized, his voice low and dangerous. "She copied me." He remembered the wine glass he'd left on the nightstand a week ago, the way she'd playfully taken it away to wash it, her fingers brushing his. He remembered the way she'd stared into his eyes during their anniversary dinner, holding his gaze a little too long, the light hitting his face just right. She wasn't being romantic. She was high-resolution scanning him. "Sir?" one of the guards called out. "She left something." Dominic turned. On the empty metal shelf of the safe, sitting exactly in the center, was a small, velvet jewelry box. It was a bright, obnoxious Tiffany blue, a color that didn't belong in this world of rust and blood. Dominic picked it up. It felt light. He flipped it open. There was no ring inside. Instead, folded neatly into a tiny square, was a piece of paper. Dominic unfolded it. It was a receipt, but not just any receipt. It was from the Gilded Cage, the most exclusive boutique in the city. Item: diamond tennis bracelet. Price: $45,000. Date: yesterday. Delivery: address: penthouse, 4B, The Spire, ATTN, Maxine J, Whitehead. Dominic stared at the paper. The rain hammered against the roof of the container, sounding like 1,000 fingers tapping in judgment. She knew. She didn't just take the leverage to protect herself. She took it because he had bought a bracelet for his mistress on the day of their son's 6-month checkup. Underneath the receipt was a second item, a small, plastic hospital bracelet. Leo Vane, the one from the maternity ward. The message was surgical in its precision. "You chose the mistress. I chose the son." "Vargas," Dominic said, crushing the receipt in his fist. "Track the delivery driver for this order. But first, get the car." "Where are we going?" "Sir?" Dominic threw the velvet box onto the wet ground and ground it under his heel. "The Spire. Maxine isn't just a mistress anymore. She's a loose end. And if Kimberly knows where she lives, then Maxine is already in the crosshairs." Dominic marched back to the SUV. He thought he was angry before, but now, realizing that his silent, obedient wife had been tracking his affair with the same cold efficiency she used to dismantle his empire, he felt something worse than anger. He felt exposed, and for a man like Dominic Vane, exposure was a death sentence. The elevator to the penthouse of the Spire moved faster than gravity seemed to allow, a silver bullet shooting up 40 stories into the storm. Dominic stood in the center of the car, water dripping from the hem of his coat onto the mirrored floor. He watched his own reflection. He looked like a man who was unraveling, stitch by expensive stitch. When the doors slid open, the sound of jazz music and clinking glass drifted out. Maxine J, Whitehead, was waiting for him. She was wearing a silk robe that cost more than most people's cars, and on her wrist, the diamond tennis bracelet glittered like a handcuff. "Dom?" she cooed, tilting her head. She held a crystal glass of champagne. "You didn't say you were coming. I would have put on the red dress." She looked at him with that hungry, chaotic adoration he used to crave. Now, looking at her was like looking at a crime scene. Dominic didn't speak. He walked past her, his boots leaving muddy tracks on the white plush carpet. He marched into the living room, his eyes scanning the space not as a lover, but as a predator sensing a trap. "Dom, what's wrong?" "You're soaking wet." Maxine laughed nervously, trailing behind him. "Did you see the bracelet? It arrived this morning. It's gorgeous. I knew you wouldn't forget." Dominic spun around, grabbing her wrist. He held it up to the light, inspecting the diamonds. They were real, but the receipt in the shipping container said Kimberly had intercepted the delivery, which meant Kimberly had allowed the delivery to happen. "Why? Who brought this?" Dominic demanded, his voice rough. "A courier," Maxine stammered, trying to pull her arm back. "Just a courier." "Dom, you're hurting me." "Who else has been in this apartment, Maxine?" "No one. Just the cleaning lady, and the decorator." Dominic went still. "The decorator?" Maxine rubbed her wrist, looking confused. "Yeah. You know, I wanted to redo the feng shui. She came by last week. Sweet girl. Quiet. Wore these big glasses." Dominic closed his eyes. Kimberly. She hadn't just hacked the house. She had walked right into the lion's den, adjusted the pillows, and smiled at the woman sleeping with her husband. "Show me," Dominic said. "Show me what she changed." Maxine pointed to a large, abstract metal sculpture sitting on the mantelpiece. It was jagged, modern, ugly. She brought that, said it would balance the energy in the room. A gift. Dominic walked over to the sculpture. It was heavy, brushed steel. He ran his fingers along the base. There was no seam, no screw. But Dominic knew Kimberly now. He knew she didn't do random acts of kindness. He grabbed the heavy sculpture and smashed it against the marble hearth. Maxine screamed. "Dom, are you crazy?" The sculpture cracked open. Inside the hollow steel shell, there wasn't just a listening device. There was a high-definition, wide-angle camera lens, wired to a battery pack and a transmitter. It was pointed directly at the sofa, directly at the bed. Dominic stared at the blinking red light. It was active. It was recording. "She's been watching," Dominic whispered. "Everything." Maxine stared at the broken device, her face draining of color. Who has been watching?" "My wife," Maxine laughed, a high, hysterical sound. "Your wife? The one who bakes cookies? Dom, stop it. She doesn't even know I exist." "She knows," Dominic said, leaning down to pick up the transmitter. "She knows what you drink. She knows what you wear. She probably knows the passcode to your phone better than you do." He held the camera up to his face, staring directly into the lens. He knew, somewhere miles away, Kimberly was watching this feed on a screen. "You think this is a game?" Dominic spoke into the camera, his voice low and lethal. "You think because you saw me here, you have leverage? I will burn this city down to find you, Kimberly." The device didn't answer. But suddenly, the smart home system in the penthouse chimed. The jazz music cut out. A voice filled the room. But it wasn't Kimberly's voice. It was a recording, Maxine's voice. "He's never going to leave her, Mom. She's pathetic. Have you seen her? She looks like she's scared of her own shadow. I'm just waiting for the payout." Maxine gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth. It was a phone call she had made to her mother 3 months ago. Then, another clip played. Dominic's voice this time. "She's just the mother of my heir, Max. She's not a partner. She's furniture." Dominic stood frozen. Kimberly wasn't just recording them. She was broadcasting their betrayal back to them. She was showing them the ugly, raw truth of their relationship. Maxine looked at Dominic, tears welling in her eyes. You said I was the only one who understood you." "Shut up!" Dominic snapped. He didn't care about Maxine's feelings. He cared about the fact that Kimberly had weeks, maybe months, of footage. Footage she could send to his rivals. Footage she could send to the FBI. Suddenly, the lights in the penthouse flickered and died. The smart shades on the floor-to-ceiling windows began to rise, exposing them to the skyline. Dominic's phone buzzed in his pocket. A single text message. Sender. Unknown. "I enjoyed the show, Dominic. but I prefer the ending where the villain loses everything. P.S. The police are on their way to the Spire. An anonymous tip about illegal narcotics in penthouse 4B. Dominic looked at Maxine. Where is your stash, Max? In the bedroom safe, she whispered. Dom, there's a kilo of cocaine in there. You gave it to me to hold. Dominic swore. It wasn't just a breakup. It was a raid. We have to go. Dominic grabbed her arm, dragging her toward the door. Now, as they ran into the hallway, sirens began to wail in the distance, rising up from the streets below like a choir of wolves. Kimberly wasn't just hunting him. She was herding him, and he had just walked right into the second cage. The sirens fading behind them sounded like dying animals. Dominic didn't look back at the Spire. He sat in the back of the lead SUV, watching the city blur into streaks of neon and rain. Beside him, Maxine was sobbing quietly, shivering in her silk robe. But Dominic didn't offer her his jacket. He didn't even offer her a glance. Pull over, Dominic ordered. The convoy screeched to a halt on the shoulder of the I-5 on-ramp. Get her out, Dominic said to the guard in the passenger seat. Dom, wait! Maxine grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his suit. You can't leave me here. The police. You're a liability, Maxine. You're a witness. And right now, you're dead weight. He peeled her fingers off his arm. Barker, take her to the safe house in Tacoma. Lock her in a room. No phone. No windows. If she speaks to anyone, put her in the ground. Maxine's scream was cut short as the guard dragged her out into the rain and shoved her into the trailing support vehicle. Dominic signaled the driver. The lead SUV tore off into the night, leaving the Mistress in the dust of his warpath. Sir, Vargas said from the front seat, his face glowing pale blue from his laptop screen. I got a hit. A digital footprint. Is it real this time? Dominic asked, cleaning his gun with a silk handkerchief. It's a credit card transaction. The emergency card you kept in the safe. The one she stole. Vargas tapped the screen. Gas station. Gold bar. She's heading east. Dominic's eyes narrowed. East meant the mountains. East meant the isolation of the Cascades. She's going to the cabin, Dominic realized. The Wolf's Den. It was a fortified retreat, built into the side of a mountain, accessible only by a private road. It was where Dominic went when he needed to disappear. It was stocked with food, weapons, and a satellite uplink. If Kimberly got there, she could dig in for months. Mobilize the Ghost Squad, Dominic commanded. We don't take chances. I want thermal drones in the air and a perimeter net wide enough to catch a gnat. We catch her before she breaches the door. The hunt was on. For the next hour, the convoy cut through the storm like a spear. The city lights faded, replaced by the towering black shapes of pine trees and the crushing darkness of the mountain pass. The rain turned to sleet, peppering the windshield like buckshot. Drone feed is up, Vargas announced. Heat signature detected in the main living area. Movement near the fireplace. Dominic watched the grainy thermal image. A small, glowing orange blob was moving back and forth. She's pacing, Dominic whispered. She's nervous. They killed the headlights a mile out. The SUVs rolled up the gravel driveway in stealth mode. Dominic stepped out into the freezing air, his breath pluming like smoke. He signaled the Ghost Squad, 6 men in tactical gear, silent as death. They surrounded the cabin. The windows were dark, but a faint glow flickered from the chimney. Smoke. She had started a fire. Dominic moved to the front door. He didn't bother with the keypad. He placed a strip of explosive tape on the lock. 3, 2, 1. Boom. The door blew inward. The team swarmed the room, laser sights cutting through the smoke. Clear left, clear right. Dominic walked in, his weapon raised, ready to see fear in his wife's eyes, ready to see her holding Leo, begging for mercy. But the room was empty. The fire was roaring in the hearth, crackling merrily. In front of it, Dominic's favorite leather armchair was rocking back and forth, but Kimberly wasn't in it. Sitting in the chair was a mechanism, a simple, crude pendulum made from a heavy book and a piece of string, swaying with the rhythm of a metronome. It was pushing the chair, creating the movement the drones had seen. And on the seat of the chair, wrapped in the blanket Leo used to sleep with, was a baby monitor. Dominic ripped the blanket away. The monitor was on. Static hissed through the speaker. "She's not here," Dominic said, his voice hollow. "It's a decoy." "Sir," Vargas called out from the kitchen, his voice pitched high with panic. You need to see this. Dominic walked into the kitchen. On the counter, a laptop was open. It wasn't Kimberly's laptop, it was his, the one he kept at the cabin for emergencies. The screen was black, with a green progress bar at 100%. Upload complete. What did she upload? Dominic asked. She didn't upload, sir, Vargas said, typing furiously. She broadcasted. Broadcasted what? The cabin isn't just a hideout. It's a node. It's connected to the syndicate's offshore banking relay. Vargas looked up, terrified. She used the time we spent driving up the mountain to bypass the biometric locks. While we were watching the heat signature of a rocking chair, she was draining the liquidity accounts. Dominic felt the floor tilt. He had brought his best men, his heavy artillery, and his focus to the mountains. He had left the digital gates unguarded. The baby monitor in the living room suddenly crackled to life. The static cleared. A voice came through, calm, soft. The voice of a woman who used to read bedtime stories. You always liked the hunt, Dominic. You get so focused on the target, you forget to watch your back. Dominic sprinted back to the living room, grabbing the monitor. Where are you? I'm miles away, Kimberly's voice replied. But I left you a gift. Check the fireplace. Dominic looked at the roaring fire. He saw something sitting in the embers, not burning, a metal box. He kicked the logs aside and dragged the box out. It was hot, singing the leather of his gloves. He popped the latch. Inside wasn't money. It wasn't a bomb. It was a single, leather-bound book. Old, worn. Dominic recognized it instantly. It was the Black Ledger. But it wasn't the original. It was a copy. And on the first page, written in red marker, were the words, Volume 1 of 10. Sent to the FBI. 9 p.m. She hadn't just stolen his money. She had started the clock on his freedom. The fire in the hearth had died down to glowing red embers, casting long, dancing shadows against the log walls of the cabin. Dominic stood frozen, the charred leather book heavy in his hands. Volume 1 of 10. The words were written in red ink, precise and unhurried. Check the channels, Dominic barked, his voice cracking. Vargas, check the FBI tip lines. Check the encrypted leaked servers. Did she send it? Vargas was typing so fast his fingers were a blur. Scanning. Nothing on the public frequencies. Nothing on the dark web leak sites. Wait. I'm into the Bureau's internal sorting queue. He paused, sweating. It's empty, sir. She didn't send it. Dominic let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. It was a bluff. A terrified woman trying to buy time. She hesitated, Dominic sneered, tossing the book onto the table. She doesn't have the guts to burn the house down while she's still inside it. If she leaks this, the government freezes her assets too. She'd be destitute. The phone in Dominic's pocket buzzed. It wasn't a text this time. It was a call. Unknown caller. Dominic held the phone up. Everyone in the room, the ghost squad. Vargas went silent. He swiped answer and put it on speaker. You blinked, Dominic said, his voice dripping with venom. You didn't send it. Hello, Dominic. Kimberly's voice filled the room. It wasn't shaky. It wasn't the voice of a woman on the run. It sounded like she was sitting in a boardroom. I didn't send it because I'm not an amateur. You don't dump all your ammunition in the first volley. You're bluffing, Kim. You send that file, you go down with me. You're an accessory. Am I? She sounded amused. Turn to page 42 of the book. Dominic flipped the charred pages. Page 42. It was a log of a shipment of illegal arms to a cartel in Juarez. But at the bottom, there was a digital signature. Authorized by Dominic Vane. Flagged for review by Anonymous Whistleblower, K.P. Date, 2 years ago. I've been reporting you for years, Dominic, she said, softy. Building a paper trail that proves I was a coerced spouse, terrified for her life, gathering evidence to save her son. I'm not your accomplice, I'm your witness. And the FBI loves a witness. Dominic felt the blood drain from his face. She hadn't just stolen the ledger, she had annotated it. She had immunized herself. If you want to stay out of a federal supermax, Dominic hissed, you will bring my son back. Tonight. No, here is how this works, Kimberly interrupted, her tone hardening into steel. The file I uploaded to the FBI server isn't a document, it's a daemon program, a dead man's switch. Speak English. It's a countdown clock, Dominic. Every 60 minutes the program pings my phone. If I don't enter a specific biometric code, it releases the next volume. Volume 1 was just tax evasion. Volume 5 is the judge bribery. Volume 10, well, Volume 10 is the body count. Dominic looked at Vargas. The tech genius nodded slowly, his face pale. It's possible, sir. If she encrypted the payload, we can't stop the release from our end. Only she can stop it. You created a suicide vest, Dominic whispered into the phone. And you're wearing it. I'm holding the detonator, she corrected. And right now, my finger is getting tired. What do you want? Money? You emptied the liquidity accounts. Is that not enough? I don't want your blood money. I want a divorce. A clean, uncontested, full custody divorce. And I want you to sign the papers in person. In person? Dominic's eyes narrowed. Why? So your sniper can take a shot? So I can look you in the eye and know you understand that if you ever come near Leo again, I won't just send the files. I will destroy everything you have ever touched. Name the place, Dominic said. He would agree. And then he would kill her. He didn't care about the files anymore. He would kill her before she could enter the code. Tomorrow, noon. The Seattle Aquarium. Public, Dominic scoffed. Crowded, smart. Meet me in front of the Ring of Life tank. The sharks. It felt appropriate. Come alone, Dominic. If I see Vargas, or the Ghost Squad, or even a bulge in your jacket that looks like a gun, I stop entering the code. And at 12:01, you become the most wanted man in America. I'll be there, Dominic promised. Don't be late. The clock is ticking. The line went dead. Dominic slowly lowered the phone. He looked at the team of killers standing around him. They looked useless now. Bullets couldn't stop a cloud server. Knives couldn't cut a digital thread. Sir, Vargas said quietly, if we take her out, the code doesn't get entered. The files release automatically. I know. Dominic slammed his fist onto the table, cracking the wood. I can't kill her. Not yet. So what do? We go to the aquarium. Dominic walked to the window, staring out at the black, snowy night. She thinks she has leverage because she controls the information. But she's forgetting one thing. What's that, sir? She has to show her face. She has to step out of the digital world and into the physical one. Dominic turned, his eyes glinting with a cold, desperate light. I can't shoot her, but I can break her. I have 12 hours to find something she cares about more than her freedom. She has the kid, Vargas pointed out. What else is there? Dominic smiled, but it was a smile devoid of humor. Maxine. Sir? You dumped Maxine at a safe house. Exactly. Kimberly hates Maxine. She mocked her in those videos. She wants to see Maxine destroyed. And if I bring Maxine to the meeting, if I put the Mistress in the line of fire, Kimberly might just flinch. You're going to use Maxine as a human shield? I'm going to use her as bait. Dominic straightened his tie. Get the helicopter. We're going back to the city. I have a meeting with a shark. The Seattle Aquarium at noon was a chaotic sea of screaming children and exhausted parents, bathed in the artificial bioluminescent glow of the exhibits. Dominic Vane hated it instantly. It smelled of popcorn and captivity. He walked through the entrance tunnel, his hand clamped around Maxine's upper arm like a vice. Maxine was wearing a trench coat Dominic had forced her into, hiding the silk robe she'd been dragged out in. She was trembling, her mascara smeared, a jagged crack in the veneer of the glamorous mistress she used to be. Stop shaking, Dominic whispered into her ear, his voice a low rumble against the noise of the crowd. You wanted to be part of my world, Maxine. This is it. He's going to kill us, she whimpered. No, he isn't. Because you are the shield. They reached the Ring of Life exhibit. It was a massive 360-degree glass tunnel. Above their heads, gray nurse sharks and stingrays glided through the water, casting long, predatory shadows on the floor. Kimberly was waiting. She stood in the center of the tunnel, silhouetted against the blue water. She wasn't wearing the beige cardigans she used to wear at the fortress. She wore a sharp, charcoal blazer and combat boots. Her hair was pulled back tight. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like the CEO of a company that had just initiated a hostile takeover. Dominic stopped 10 feet away. The crowd flowed around them, oblivious to the fact that 3 lives were hanging by a thread in the middle of the hallway. You came, Kimberly said. Her voice was calm, cutting through the ambient noise of bubbling water. I don't break appointments, Dominic replied, stepping forward, dragging Maxine with him. And look, I brought a guest. I thought you two might have some catching up to do." He shoved Maxine forward. Maxine stumbled, catching herself before she fell at Kimberly's feet. She looked up, eyes wide with shame and terror. Dominic watched Kimberly's face, waiting for the flinch, waiting for the jealousy, the anger, the tears, the emotional crack that would give him an opening. Kimberly looked down at Maxine. She didn't look angry. She looked bored. "Hello, Maxine," Kimberly said, as if greeting a mail carrier. "You look tired." "She's wearing the bracelet," Dominic sneered, trying to twist the knife. "The one I bought the day Leo had his fever. Remember?" Kimberly shifted her gaze to Dominic. Her eyes were green ice. "I remember. That was the day I realized you weren't just a criminal, Dominic. You were a cliché, and clichés are predictable." She reached into her blazer and pulled out a thick envelope. She held it out. The divorce papers, full custody, irrevocable surrender of parental rights, and a restraining order that covers the entire West Coast. Dominic laughed, a short, sharp bark. "You think a piece of paper stops me? I own the judges in this state, not the federal ones," Kimberly countered. "And if I don't punch the code into my phone in 4 minutes, the Dead Man Switch emails Volume 2 to the Department of Justice. Volume 2 covers your bribery network, Dominic, including Judge Holloway." Dominic's jaw tightened. She had checkmated his judicial influence. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. He could smell her not lavender anymore. She smelled of ozone and rain. "I'll sign," Dominic whispered, leaning in so only she could hear. "But you know this doesn't end here. You can't run forever. I have resources you can't even imagine. One day, you'll slip. You'll stop for gas. You'll use a credit card. And I will be there." Kimberly didn't back down. She leaned in, matching his intensity. "You're assuming you'll still have resources," she whispered back. "Sign the papers." Dominic snatched the pen she offered. He slapped the envelope against the glass wall of the shark tank, the vibration making a passing shark twitch. He scribbled his signature aggressively, tearing the paper. "Done," he spat, shoving the papers back at her. "Now turn off the countdown." Kimberly checked the signature. She nodded. She pulled out her phone and typed a code. "The timer is paused. For 24 hours. Enough time for me to disappear again." "I'll find you," Dominic promised. "No, you won't, because you're going to be very busy." Kimberly looked at Maxine, who was still standing awkwardly between them. "You can have him, Maxine. He's all yours. Though, looking at him now, I'm not sure why we fought over him." Kimberly turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of tourists. Dominic stood fuming, his hands balling into fists. He wanted to chase her. He wanted to tear the place apart. But he knew the camera feeds in the aquarium were likely already hacked, watching his every move. He looked down at Maxine. She was staring at Kimberly's, retreating back with a look of pure awe. "She won," Maxine whispered. "She didn't win." Dominic grabbed Maxine's arm again, hard enough to bruise. "She just bought herself a head start. Let's go." "Where?" Maxine asked, her voice trembling. "Back to the car. You're going back to the safe house, and this time I'm putting a guard inside the room with you." Maxine looked at Dominic's face. She saw the cruelty there, the cold, unfeeling rage. She realized in that moment that she wasn't his partner. She wasn't even his mistress anymore. She was a loose end. And loose ends in Dominic's world didn't get severance packages. They got severed. As Dominic dragged her toward the exit, Maxine's hand brushed against her pocket. She felt the burner phone she had swiped from the guard's jacket in the SUV when he wasn't looking. She was trapped between a monster and a ghost. And if she wanted to survive, she realized she might have to stop waiting for Dominic to save her and start acting like Kimberly. The armored SUV cut through the rain-slicked streets of downtown Seattle like a hearse in a hurry. Inside, the silence was suffocating. Dominic sat staring out the window, his hand still clenching the signed divorce papers, his knuckles white. He wasn't thinking about the custody agreement. He was thinking about ballistics, about how far a sniper rifle could shoot from the roof of the aquarium, about how he had let Kimberly walk away because he was afraid of a server. Next to him, Maxine was huddled in the corner, her thumb furiously tapping on the burner phone she kept hidden inside her trench coat. She was panicking. She saw the look in Dominic's eyes back at the shark tank. She knew she was being driven to a slaughterhouse, not a safe house. She needed leverage. She needed to be useful. "I can fix this," she told herself. "I can prove I'm not just a liability." Maxine's father wasn't just a nobody. He was a mid-level lieutenant in the Ricci crime family. Dominic had always forbidden her from mixing business with their affair, but desperate times called for desperate measures. She pulled up a contact. Santino Ricci, brother. She typed a frantic message. Dom is compromised. We are on the I-5 bridge heading south. He needs extraction. Bring the heavy crew. If we save him, we own him. She hit send. The phone buzzed. Message delivered. Maxine let out a shaky breath. She smiled, just a little. When the Ricci soldiers showed up to escort them to safety, Dominic would see. He would see that she was the loyal one, that she had the connections he needed. High above the city, in a server room that didn't officially exist, a line of code flashed red on a monitor. Kimberly E. Pacina sat back in her chair, watching the data stream from the stolen burner phone. She had flagged the device's IMEI number the moment it pinged near the aquarium. She read Maxine's text. "Oh, Maxine," Kimberly whispered, taking a sip of tea. "You always were too eager to please." Kimberly didn't block the message. She didn't delete it. She simply redirected it. Instead of sending the GPS coordinates to the Ricci family, Kimberly's algorithm rerouted the packet to a different server. A server belonging to the Volkov syndicate, Dominic Vane's bloodiest rivals. Back in the SUV, Maxine leaned forward, touching Dominic's arm. "Dom, don't worry," she said, her voice trembling with false confidence. "I handled it." Dominic turned slowly, looking at her like she was a speaking insect. "You handled what?" "I called for backup. Real backup. My brother's crew. They're meeting us at the end of the bridge." Dominic froze. "You did what?" "I sent them our location. They'll be here in 2 minutes." Dominic looked out the windshield. In the distance, coming up the on-ramp, he saw 3 matte black vans. They were moving fast, aggressive, taking up all 3 lanes. "Maxine," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "Your brother drives Lincolns. Those are Mercedes Sprinters." Maxine squinted. "Maybe they got new cars?" "Those aren't Ricci cars," Dominic roared, lunging for the partition. "Driver, reverse. It's an ambush." But it was too late. The lead van slammed on its brakes, drifting sideways to block the bridge. The rear doors flew open. Men in heavy body armor poured out, carrying automatic rifles. They weren't Italians. They were Russians. "Volkov," Dominic spat. "You called the Volkovs." "I didn't," Maxine screamed, clutching the phone. "I texted Santino. I swear. You just gave my coordinates to the only people in this city who want me dead more than my wife does." Bullets began to hammer the SUV, the armored glass spiderwebbed, white cracks blooming like frost. The driver swerved, slamming into the concrete median. The SUV spun, metal screeching against stone, before coming to a violent halt. Dominic kicked the door open, adrenaline flooding his system. He grabbed his gun. "Stay down," he yelled at his driver. He looked at Maxine. She was curled in a ball on the floor, sobbing. "I tried to help," she wailed. "You helped her," Dominic growled. "You did exactly what she wanted." Kimberly hadn't just used Maxine as a shield at the aquarium. She had turned her into a homing beacon. She knew Maxine would panic. She knew Maxine would try to call for help, and she knew exactly where to send the invite. Dominic returned fire, taking cover behind the engine block. The Volkov soldiers were advancing, pinning him down. He was outgunned. He was trapped on a bridge. His phone buzzed. He didn't have to look to know who it was. He tapped his earpiece. "You set me up. I didn't send the text." "Dominic." Kimberly's voice was calm amidst the chaos of gunfire. "Your mistress did. I just made sure it got to the right audience." "I'm going to die here," Dominic shouted, firing 2 rounds blindly over the hood. "No, you won't. The police are 2 minutes out. I tipped them off too. You have a choice, Dominic. Surrender to the Volkovs and die, or surrender to the police. Go to prison and lose your empire." Dominic looked at the advancing Russians. Then he heard the sirens approaching from the north. She had boxed him in. Death or cage. "I choose survival," Dominic snarled. He looked back into the car at Maxine. "Run," he told her. "What?" "Run, Maxine. Because if I survive this, and I find you, I won't be as polite as the Volkovs." Maxine scrambled out of the broken door, running blindly into the rain, her heels clicking on the asphalt, disappearing into the smoke. Dominic dropped his gun and raised his hands as the police cruisers screeched to a halt. sandwiching him between the law and the mob. He was alive. But as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, he realized the terrifying truth. The fortress hadn't fallen because of a battering ram. It had fallen because he let the wrong people inside. The interrogation room at the precinct smelled of stale coffee and despair. Dominic Vane sat at the metal table, his bespoke suit ruined, his cuffs clinking against the steel loop, bolted to the floor. He wasn't afraid. He was annoyed. He had been arrested before. It was a ritual, a minor inconvenience like a parking ticket. He checked his watch. His lawyer, Sterling, was 20 minutes late. When the heavy door finally buzzed open, Sterling walked in. But the man who entered wasn't the shark. Dominic paid a retainer of $500,000 a year. This man looked like a prey animal. His tie was loosened. He was sweating. He didn't sit down. "Get the bail posted, Sterling," Dominic said, leaning back. "And get the judge on the phone. Tell him I'm doubling his Christmas bonus." Sterling didn't move. He placed his briefcase on the table with a trembling hand. "I can't post bail, Dom." Dominic's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean you can't?" "Pull it from the operational fund. The operational fund is gone." "Then the Cayman reserves?" "Gone." "The emergency cash in Zurich?" "It's all gone, Dominic," Sterling shouted, his voice cracking. "Every cent, every shell company, every offshore trust. It didn't just disappear. It was liquidated." Dominic went still. "She stole it." "No," Sterling shook his head, looking at Dominic with a mix of pity and horror. "She didn't steal it. Theft we could fight. Theft leaves a trail we can claw back. She donated it." "She what?" At 9:05 a.m., a series of anonymous transfers moved the entire liquidity of the Vane Syndicate $140 million to a global network of charities. Domestic abuse shelters, orphanages, victims of gang violence funds. Sterling let out a dry, hysterical laugh. "It was made in your name, Dominic. According to the IRS, you are now the greatest philanthropist in the history of organized crime." Dominic felt the room spin. It was the ultimate tactical strike. She hadn't just bankrupted him, she had made the money untouchable. He couldn't sue a battered women's shelter to get his drug money back. "Without money we have no power," Dominic whispered. "It gets worse," Sterling said, wiping his forehead. "Because the payroll bounced this morning. Your captains down at the docks walked off the job. The Volkovs moved in an hour ago. They took the shipping lanes without firing a single shot. Your men stepped aside and let them in." Dominic closed his eyes. He could see it. The empire he had built on fear and loyalty crumbling because the checks didn't clear. Kimberly understood the one truth he had ignored. Loyalty in this world is a subscription service. And she had cancelled his credit card. "And Vargas?" Dominic asked. "Tell me my tech genius is fixing this." Sterling pointed to the mirror on the wall. "Vargas is in the next room. He turned state's witness 20 minutes ago. Apparently, someone sent him an encrypted file showing that you planned to have him eliminated after the job was done." "I never planned that." "Doesn't matter. The file looked real. It had your digital signature, Kimberly's signature. She turned your own paranoia against you." Dominic looked at his hands. Handcuffed. Empty. "So that's it," Dominic said quietly. "The dead man's switch." She released the files. "Volume 2 went to the press," Sterling confirmed. "It's on every news channel. The emails, the hit orders, the bribery logs. The DA isn't offering a plea deal, Dom. They're talking RICO. They're talking life without parole. Supermax." Dominic leaned his head back against the cinder-block wall. He thought about the fortress, the security systems, the armed guards. He had spent his life building walls to keep enemies out. But he had invited the architect of his destruction into his bed. "She stripped me," Dominic whispered. "She took the money. She took the territory. She took the reputation. She left you one thing," Sterling said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. Dominic looked at it. It was a picture, printed on standard copy paper. It was a time-stamped photo from a security camera at a private airfield. It showed a plane taking off, tail number redacted. But in the window, a silhouette, a woman holding a baby. She was gone. "Get out, Sterling," Dominic said. "Dom, Get out." Sterling fled the room. Dominic was left alone in the silence. The hum of the fluorescent light sounded like the buzzing of a fly caught in a web he had walked into, smiling, 3 years ago. The door buzzed open again. A guard stepped in. "Vane, your transfer is approved. Transport to Federal Holding is in 10 minutes. Dominic stood up. He wasn't the Wolf of Seattle anymore. He was just another inmate. "One more thing," the guard said, checking his clipboard. "A package arrived for you. Checked by security. It's clean." He handed Dominic a small, white envelope. Dominic opened it with clumsy, shackled fingers. Inside was a single postcard. No picture. Just a blank white card with one sentence typed in the center. "Now you know what it feels like to be furniture." Dominic stared at the card until the words blurred. The door opened. The chains rattled. And Dominic Vane walked out of the room to meet the end of his life, leaving the ghost of his wife to inherit the world. The sun over the Adriatic Sea didn't feel like the sun in Seattle. It felt older, warmer. It baked the stone terrace of the small, whitewashed villa where the woman formerly known as Kimberly Piscina now sat. She wore a simple linen dress, no diamonds, no tactical boots. Her hair was lighter, bleached by the salt air, blowing loosely in the breeze. On the rug beside her, Leo was stacking wooden blocks. He was trying to build a tower. Every time it got too high, it wobbled and fell. And every time it fell, he didn't cry. He laughed. He laughed because falling was just part of the game. He laughed because he had never learned to be afraid of failure. Kimberly watched him, sipping a glass of cheap, local wine that tasted better than any $1,000 vintage Dominic had ever poured her. A laptop sat open on the table. It was the only piece of technology in the house. The screen displayed a news article from the Seattle Times. Vane Syndicate boss sentenced to life in federal supermax. The final collapse of the Vane empire comes as authorities recover the last of the Black Ledger files. Kimberly read the headline once. She didn't smile, she didn't gloat, she just felt light. The kind of weightlessness that comes when you finally put down a heavy pack you've been carrying for miles. She closed the laptop. She wouldn't need it anymore. The dead man's switch was empty. The ghost in the machine had finished its work. She picked up Leo, holding him close. He smelled of sunscreen and sea salt. Not expensive lotion. Not fear. "Dada?" Leo burbled, pointing at a seagull. "No," Kimberly whispered, kissing the top of his head. "That's a bird, Leo. Birds are free. We like birds." She walked to the edge of the terrace, looking down at the jagged cliffs where the blue water crashed against the rocks. In her pocket, she fingered the small silver key to the safe deposit box where she kept her new passports. Elena, Sarah, Kate, names she could wear like coats. But here, in the quiet, she wasn't any of them. She was just the architect. She remembered the night she met Dominic. The rain, the umbrella, the way he looked at her like she was something to be acquired, catalogued, and displayed. He had mistaken her silence for submission. He had mistaken her observation for admiration. He never understood that while he was building a fortress to keep the world out, she was memorizing the blueprints to let herself out. Dominic Vane had been a master of control. He controlled the shipping lanes, the judges, the streets. But he couldn't control the one thing that mattered, the narrative. She had rewritten his story. She had turned the predator into the prey, the king into the pauper, and the wife into the widow without him ever having to die. Leo squirmed in her arms, wanting to get down. She set him on the ground. He toddled toward a flower pot, pulling at a bright red geranium. "Careful," she said softly. "Roots run deep." She looked back at the closed laptop. She thought about Maxine, running somewhere in the rain. She thought about Vargas, looking over his shoulder in witness protection. She thought of Dominic, sitting in a 6x8 cell, staring at a concrete wall, wondering how he missed the signs. He missed them because he never looked down. He never looked at the foundation. Kimberly turned her back on the view. She walked into the small, cool kitchen to start dinner. She chopped vegetables with a sharp knife, the rhythmic sound filling the house. It was a domestic sound, a safe sound. She wasn't building empires anymore. She wasn't toppling kings. She was building a lunch, and for the first time in her life, that was enough. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold, the villa went quiet. The only sound was the ocean, relentless and patient, eating away at the stone cliffs, grain by grain. Because that was the truth she had taught Dominic, the lesson that cost him everything. Power isn't the fortress you build. Power is knowing where the cracks are.